All right, today we're talking about intentional growth, how to view and run your company like an asset. My guest today is Ryan Tansom. I'll tell you more about him in a second, so stay tuned.
Welcome to the Smart Business Revolution podcast, where we feature top entrepreneurs, business leaders, and thought leaders and ask them how they built key relationships to get where they are today. Now, let's get started with the show.
All right, welcome everyone. John Corcoran here. I'm the host of this show. You know, every week I talk to smart CEOs, founders, and entrepreneurs from all kinds of different companies. We've had Netflix, Kinko's, Grubhub, Redfin, YPO, EO, Activation, Blizzard, Lending Tree. Check out the archives. Lots of great episodes for you there. And of course, this episode brought to you by Rise 25, my company where we help B2B businesses to get clients, referrals, and strategic partnerships with done-for-you podcasts and content marketing. And you can learn more about what we do at rise25.com. Lots of great resources for you there as well. And my guest here today is Ryan Tansom. He's the founder of Arkona and creator of the Intentional Growth Framework. We're going to talk about that. He's got a really interesting background. He grew up in a family business, and he eventually got to the position of executive VP. This was a 21 million plus entity, and he had a background and training in leadership and management, and really that became relevant because he had to help this company really kind of steer the ship in the right direction. And eventually they were able to sell it to a local competitor in 2014 for an 8-figure sum. And from there, he went and created, like many entrepreneurs do, created the solution that he wished that he had, the company that could have helped him guide him through this rough patch. So we're going to hear all about the highs and lows. And he's a big speaker, speaks to Vistage and EO Entrepreneurs Organization, all kinds of stuff. He also is a longtime podcaster, about 400 episodes of the Intentional Growth podcast. So kudos to you, Ryan. That's not easy to do. Congrats to that. Be sure to go check that out. But Ryan, hey, I love to hear stories about where people started. I love to hear stories about what you were like as a kid. And, you grew up in Minnesota, cutting grass. How did you, growing up in this entrepreneurial family with a father who had started a company, what were the sorts of side hustles you had as a kid?
Well, probably the very typical, and thanks for having me, John, and very typical stuff. It all started out with John, with me asking, I want this. And my dad going, oh, isn't that nice? I don't care. Why don't you go earn some money to go buy it? And so it was my desire to get a CD player, a portable CD player that was probably like $400 back then. And I had no money. So I decided to cut our grass. And then it actually migrated into my mom's mom and her stepfather went over there, cut their grass with a push mower. And then they're like, hey, you can keep doing this each week. And then I just ended up getting everybody on the block. My grandfather I would get dropped off on a Sunday, and it was like a whole Sunday, John. And I was probably I started out like 10, 11 or something like that. And I remember all my buddies are having fun, and I'm getting dropped off in this neighborhood, half hour away from my house, and spending the whole day cutting grass and just hating every minute of it, but loving the money. And so my grandpa would then, all the way till I got my driver's license, we would then, because I bagged it was like a neighborhood, so I'd bag all the yard, the clippings, and then that's how I learned to back in a trailer in front of a bunch of people. So it went from that to then selling Cutco, and just I was always in the hustling mode because
you like the sales.
Oh yeah, and that was because of my dad. So it was truly, I was emulating what he knew best, and that was how to sell.
Did you learn sales from your father?
I don't know if anybody learns sales. I mean, you can learn sales. I don't want to go that extreme. What I meant is I don't know if you're a natural salesperson or if you're just an extrovert. I don't know, John, other than the fact that what was ingrained in my head, John, from an early age. So my dad barely graduated high school. He always jokes around, he went to 90 days of college until he ran out of beer money and pizza money. And then he decided he had to go sell something to keep the money coming in. So his deal was calling cards. I don't know if you remember back in the day, calling cards, and then credit card machines, landed on copiers. But I say that because, John, at 9 o'clock at night, as he was starting our business, and I know we'll get into this, I would go home every night and I would wait, because at 9 o'clock when he got home, because he would work so long, that's when he would give me the play-by-play of the business. And I watched what he was able to do. And what he said to me, John, and my upbringing was not like, hey, here's how the world works. It was more like, you have some soccer cleats and a soccer ball, and we will bring you where you need to go, and you're fed and dry. But there was not a lot of mentorship, I guess. But like, there was certain things where he said to me in the car once, he's like, Ryan, here's the deal. I wasn't good at school. I wasn't, all this stuff, but I know how to be nice, talk to people, and provide value. And if you can figure out how to do that, you'll have a job for the rest of your life. And that just like stuck inside of me. So it wasn't whether was I good at sales or not good at sales. It was just like this kind of like foundational principle. And, like I've got friends where there's some parents who are a CPA. They got a completely different mantra at an early age. So I think it was that just really hit me. And then, I don't know, man, you're young and all of a sudden you go do hard work, get $100 that none of your friends have $100. They got two, and you can go buy a CD player or buy PS2 or whatever the hell, back in the Dreamcast, early Nintendo.
Yeah.
Watching that is pretty sweet.
Yeah. Now, I've interviewed plenty of people who have described, like you did, a father or a family member who was charismatic or who had good sales skills, but they didn't build a business from nothing to 20 million a year without a college degree. That's like a unicorn type of result. So what beyond your father's sales skills do you think led it to get to that height? Was there something you mentioned that they went from calling cards to credit cards to copiers? Was it kind of focus? What was it? What were the few levers that led to it being that large?
There's never I don't think there's a place on this planet where the word focus is in the same sentence as Corey Tansom.
So there wasn't focus then.
No, honestly, John, and I just did a podcast in my podcast interview, and I don't know if you've experienced this, but like there's something about entrepreneurs with a visionary founder, like I can defy gravity and create something that's out of nothing. And there's this inherent confidence. And I've noticed it's either like complete narcissism, egotistic, crazy, which is not usually a lot, which is good, or it's just this crazy belief in yourself. Or what I think is the biggest pool, John, is people that need to prove to themselves or the world that they're worthy. And my dad had some stuff going on in his past that it was that driving force of, you don't think I can do it? And what, we've heard, the third of entrepreneurs are dyslexic or ADHD. And I think there's a lot of labels that it gets new. I think it's a lot more nuanced than the labels, but I think my dad is one of those people where it was this intrinsic, I need to show everybody that I can do this.
And what was that? Did he have, was the generation above him didn't believe that he could do it? Was it kind of like a chip on his shoulder? He wanted to prove himself?
Definitely a chip. It was the schooling system, like ADHD. I mean, I was the same way, dude. Like, sit down and read this. Like, why? And then they say, because. And if you want to really make me go on to a decade-long journey, just say because and don't give me a good answer. So his deal was not good at school. My grandpa was a janitor and my grandma was a school nurse. And they retired and they died with a bunch of money, not a bunch of money, but for them, like life-changing money. But so it was humble upbringings, but it was that school and a lot of it's that underdrive of been told you can't, or you're not fitting into the way that things are supposed to be.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, I've interviewed a lot of people that are second generation from a family business. And I find that there's kind of like two different paths. There's the, someday I'll go into the family business. I really like the family business, but many more of them are on the path of, I never want to go in this family business. And then oftentimes they're drawn into it sooner or later at some point anyways. And you're kind of more that path.
Correct. For some context, so I was like 12 when he started the business, I believe. And so like I was loving the play-by-play. That's really how I bonded with my dad, because I was the oldest out of both kids, oldest out of both sides of my family, actually, from all the cousins. So I got to see, and I was the first person that went to college out of both sides of my family. Wow. So it was kind of like, hey, we're all just doing it. And so like, and my dad kept saying like, look, I can do it anyways, regardless of what the world said. And so there was that kind of just mantra so when I watched him go from, he mortgaged our house, about $250,000 of old Panasonic copiers in the early 90s.
Wow.
And
That was back before. I mean, now it's like you don't need to put money down a lot of the times unless you're starting some hardcore manufacturing business. But back then you had to put a lot of money down. Wow.
Well, and I mean, for the copier business, I mean, he had to buy all the equipment and and it was actually, most of it was junk anyways, but my dad had a big pair of cojones, man. Like he just like 30 days and all I had to do, he had to sell all of them in 30 days. But that's when I watched that. I mean, he had tried, like you had said, a couple other things. So I had watched all of this, John, and I watched.
You were 12 when this happened?
When it started, yeah.
Do you remember that? Were you aware
sure.
At the time that your dad had spent $250,000 in copiers because they were all in the garage, or what?
I helped him move. I mean, it's
wow.
yeah. I mean, I remember.
You're well aware of it.
Oh yeah, we were in between soccer games and stuff, man. And like my dad's a hustler, like to this day. So I remember he had one of those car phones, John, screwed into the center console of our 1994 Suburban. That was a piece of crap, and it was like, I mean, like the thing was screwed in. The buttons were on the back, and it was like
big old wire in the back of the thing. Yeah, probably. Yeah.
It was like $2,000 a month because he was cold calling and making sure closing deals. And so like I always knew that there was no certainty. That's been the number one theme of my, like, there's never been certainty. So like, because he just took the risk. And so I was moving locations with him. I was helping install copiers. I started doing, it's called meter reads back before the copiers were connected to the internet. You had to
go out and see how many copies.
Hey, John, how many did you print? So like everything I did in the business, and then I watched it go from 2 employees up to the 115. I mean, these people were like part of my life, like the family parties, the pig roast, the trips, all that stuff. And my dad and I are very similar in the visionary extrovert salesperson, but like I'm very detail oriented and I want to know how everything works, and he just doesn't. So I was like very adamant that I had wanted nothing to do with the business, man. And I remember in one of my internships in college, I was cold calling for copiers, selling for the summer. I remember sitting in traffic, John, at 7:15 on the way in to Minneapolis, stuck in traffic in a suit. I'm drowning in a suit at age 19. I'm like, why in the hell do I got to wear a suit to sell copiers? And then I was like, and that was that scene from Office Space where the guy's like changing hands.
Stuck in traffic at the beginning. Yeah.
And that's what I felt, John. I was like, this is what it's all about. This sucks. Like, I don't like copiers. I don't like doing this. So like, I never wanted to. And there was the dynamic with my dad that I was like, I just don't know if we were going to be able to mesh, because I want to make something for myself where he's a very dominant personality. I'm like, I don't think there's room for both of us. So that was all going on.
It's good you had self-awareness of that though, too, that it was not the right fit.
I don't know. I hear you. I don't know if I would be, I don't know if I could get enough credit to say I was self-aware, other than I just knew that my dad made me crabby.
Okay.
And then like from certain perspectives.
So then what happened? Because you ended up in the business anyways.
So my dad, like that business, that old industry, I mean, you could sell a copier at 200% fair market value. You could finance it, bundle it. I mean, the amount of money, John, back in the day. I mean, I grew up poor because like he was all of it was going back into the business. So we had this conversion van that only one door worked, and he was delivering copiers and then installing them himself after he'd sell it with that van. But when I went to college, the business just took off and the money started flowing. And then it was the boats, the cars, the cabins, and all this stuff. And he started going through he had to deal with some personal stuff in the past that then led to some conflicts with my mother. And so there was all this personal turmoil going on. And there was enough cash flow, John, that like he just didn't have to go in. So he kept giving our GM more money to essentially just avoid having to go in. And so the business just plateaued at that 20 million for like a long time while the cash was getting, while the cash flow was going.
Yeah.
So I worked in and out of the business. And then what happened was in 2009, I graduated college.
And the economy is just
down. I mean, dude, no one was hiring.
Yeah.
I had a bunch of job offers because I was a salesperson willing to work for $1,000 a month. And I was actually going to go and I was going to sell healthcare benefits. And the GM that was running our company is like, Ryan, you're an idiot not to come work for the family business. Copiers people are still buying them. They're still printing and all this kind of stuff. But I was like, honestly, what the heck do I got to lose?
So a lot of businesses are really suffering in that period of time, but the family business was not suffering that bad
at all. I mean, like that's the benefit of locked in bank finance maintenance contracts tied to a piece of equipment. I mean, with on 20 million, you got 12 million. That's bank finance locked in contracts. So like that income's coming no matter
helps,
what, whether people print or not. And then the other 8 million was new equipment. And so people still got to print.
Yeah.
I mean, like there was certain, certain of our clients that couldn't afford their lease payments, typically the mortgage industry, the real estate. We didn't have a lot of exposure to that. Anyways, man, I was like, okay, what the hell? And
so the GM talks you into joining the business. Okay. Doing what? Sales?
Sales. Yep. Okay. I got thrown right into the bullpen. And
what was that like going into the family business? You'd been in it from the beginning, but you'd probably been away at college, I imagine. Sometimes it's hard for a next generation family member to come in because it's hard to earn respect, or people are like, it's the owner's kid. What was that like for you?
Let's imagine. So we had a 26,000 square foot building with 115 people in it. And let's pretend you're walking into that building.
And you walk in.
Well, so think about it, man. Like we all remember the first day of our first job.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. And you're like, what's everybody doing? Everybody knows what's going on except me. Now layer in the fact that so you imagine walking in and everybody going, there he is. And so you said it, you nailed it. Yeah, right. You nailed it, dude. It's two options. There's not a gray area in between. I don't think it's either you're going to be like, you kind of fall into the entitled prick that everybody thinks you're going to be, or you work twice as hard to earn the respect that everybody would give someone that normally works half that. So
because they're not giving you the benefit of the doubt at all. They're 100%. Like, So you have to work as hard as you can.
Yeah. I don't know if there's a choice, honestly, man. Mm-hmm. And if I were to say like the benefit that I had with the position that I took, this thing about sales, you produce or you don't. Like salespeople are the easiest people to fire, right? Because it's like, hey, John, you haven't sold anything.
Right. Yeah.
It's just that simple. It's not
black or
subjective.
White.
Yeah. And so I just got into the bullpen and there was 22 salespeople. I sat right next to Clint Miller. And I was like, okay, well, here's my zip codes. And it was 400 phone calls, 15 appointments, 8 net news, 5 proposals, 3 closes, and 40 grand in quota every single month. And in 6 months, I was $3,000 shy of an annual quota of a seasoned rep. So I just didn't say no. I didn't accept no. And I just called because I was like, this is not only respect, but I needed the money because I was making $1,000 a month. So, you jump into the deep end of the pool, you can either swim or drown.
Now, when you joined, it turns out that there were some financial difficulties that the business was experiencing that you didn't know about previously. How did that come about?
Yeah, man, it's so the way that this all transpired is, so again, my dad, very distant from the company, and I want to give him because we work with a lot of people like this, man. The people are like, how in God's name could you get in that situation? Well, when you have cash flow coming in and out of a business, it can fund the owner's lifestyle for a long time, even if it's not healthy. So every single month, we're selling millions of dollars worth of stuff. And so money's coming in and out of the business. My dad kept giving the GM more money because he's just like, he had to deal with his stuff. He was going to therapy and counseling, and he was going through a bunch of personal stuff. And by the way, he's amazing right now. He's so it's amazing. So I say that because he was giving the guy more money to avoid having to deal with, because he didn't have the mental capacity to deal with the operational issues. A lot of cash flow hides a lot of sins, John. And so we're sitting in, and so because of the nature of me jumping into the business in the bullpen, even though my dad was distant, not in the day-to-day, I'm calling him every day, all day, going like, hey, like who else to learn from? Even though I was abiding by my structure of, I had a sales manager, they had a VP of sales. I mean, so I was living in the structure, but he's my freaking dad, right? So I call him, be like, how should I sell this better? This or that. Yeah. We get into the bank and the CPA meeting that December of 2009, and we found out that we lost $940,000.
Wow.
And people say, well, how is that possible? And it's like, well, because cash flow hides the actual final income statement of the year when you close it out. And so, and there's a lot of other technical complications, but we just, at that moment, John, we had a decision. Do we do a fire sale, or do we double down? And then essentially that's what we did. And we spent the next 6 years turning the business around in order to make it worth it.
And what was your relationship like with the GM?
Oh boy. I say, oh boy, because I get stomach aches of like the stuff that I said in my early 20s. I mean, man, like I had no filter. And so like, it's tough to look back, John, because like, I think, like you think back and you're like, well, I've made good decisions, but then you're like, I was freaking young. I probably shouldn't have said a bunch of stuff. So I say all that because the GM leaned more to the greedy side. I mean, not total. I mean, that's what I'm trying to, there's nuance here, but leaned more towards the greedy side, leaned more towards that. He didn't know what the heck the difference between revenue and net income was. Leaned more towards,
was he more of a sales background kind of guy?
Oh, sure. He sold copiers with my dad back 30 some years ago. So like, I mean, that's what happens when a salesperson gets promoted to CEO.
Right.
It's sales at all costs.
It's all sales, right? Yeah.
100%, man. And then I don't like people that BS, man. Like I started running into massive friction because he was just putting blinders over all the crap. And like, we'd be sitting in a meeting with Canon or my dad. And I'm like, dude, no one's selling like that. The comp plan's super messed up. Like, why are we not talking about the truth here? Because it was a reflection of him. So the more I became like the advocate for the truth, the more he did, like the more him and I just didn't get along. And I mean, there was a couple of times I tried to quit and I was like, it's me or him. That's it, man. Dad. Cause I can't deal with it. And the way I describe it is we opened up the rock because we ended up eventually firing him, and all the toxicity. I mean, it stems from the top. Right. So I ended up having to fire like 50, 60 people by the time I was 25.
That's about, you said 100 and something employees. Is that like half the company?
Yep.
Wow.
Yep. Wow.
So did you move into that GM role at some point, or did you hire someone else to be the GM? How did that go?
That was the executive vice president role. I mean, in people listening that have family businesses, it's like, hey, John, what would you like your title to be?
It doesn't matter, right?
it's like, I mean, I could have been the president, CEO, VP. It doesn't matter. It's like the way that it ultimately ended up is my dad and I were running the business. I was running like 80% of the day to day, maybe a little bit more. The CFO and him were juggling cash with the bank and the CPA firm, which probably 80% of the time, and then dealing with a lot of our large accounts and the payables and all that stuff. Yeah. While I was dealing with comp plan, sales, marketing, ops, finance, IT, that kind of stuff.
How did it go then once the GM was out and you had to have this relationship? You said previously that you and your dad didn't always get along. So how was the relationship with you and your dad once the GM was out of the way?
I'll back up and kick into give a better container on this. My dad and I, from a young age, he's been my friend, John, for most of my life. Not a friend / mentor, like so many hats. It's confusing as all hell. But first and foremost, mostly since I went to college, my friend that I look up to. And so like, it was this weird dynamic of like, we're so close. That'd be like you, and I don't know if you've dealt with this. I've had multiple partnership buyouts where you get so close to someone and then all of a sudden you can't be objective anymore. So that's where we didn't get along, is like, so it'd be like, for example, I mean, John, when I started, there was no org chart for 110 people. Like we didn't have an inventory system. Like we had 24 vehicles that were carrying on average of maybe 50 to 100 grand worth of inventory. We didn't know if it was obsolete, what kind it was. Like it was a sales guy running the business. And so like, I'd go in and be like, holy crap, this is so messed up. And I love messes to fix them. But what he heard was, my baby's ugly. And then it would be like, Ryan, do you know what I did and how long it took me to build this? And like, I risked everything and then 20 million from someone with no high school. And I'm like, I get that, Dad, but it's really messed up compared to what good looks like. So it was like, it was this way of communicating of, hey, you done her, like, this is great what we have, but it could be. So it was just that complication, John, where I don't know, man, he was so in his head that I knew that he was so mentally consumed with all of the shit he had going on that he couldn't. And I knew that, I guess. And so I was giving him a handicap. I don't know the handicap, if that's a good way to...
In spite of those comments, though, did he give you enough leeway to implement the changes that you needed to implement based on what you were seeing on the ground? Okay. Yep. Okay.
Yep.
Which was a ton of changes, it sounded like.
Yeah. And it was, again, I think about how I communicated those changes. I probably could do a lot better.
Yeah. And you actually studied in college. Your degree was management leadership. So it's almost like this was like the most real world experience you could possibly have, like stepping into a business that was a bit of a hot mess and having to turn everything around. Did you feel like you were prepared when you hit the ground from your background and your training, or was it just like, oh my gosh, I'm learning everything that I didn't know?
I realized that my private college education was for drinking and making friends, and I didn't learn anything besides maybe what a SWOT analysis was, but not how to use it. No, honestly, man, I got a liberal arts degree, and the whole time throughout college, it was like, this paper doesn't really matter as long as I can sell stuff and be nice to people. And so, like, it was, I don't know. I'm a little, the whole education system, man. I've got a whole, we could do a 2-week podcast on that, but no, I don't feel like I did. But what I think I did have ingrained in me, John, is if there's a problem that needs to be fixed, why aren't we just going to fix it? Like let's fix things. And so instead of like dilly-dallying around or making excuses, like the one thing I've always known from my dad is no shortcuts, no excuses. It's your problem. You're responsible for it. And like, I don't know how you argue with that. So it's like, here's the mess. The bank's not going to fix it for us. My VP is not going to fix it for me. The CPA is not going to, no one cares. It's our business. It's kind of like your health at the moment. So like, I think that helped a lot, because then I didn't spend time wondering why. I just started fixing.
Yeah. And I suppose I know the answer to this, but you mentioned earlier about when you first stepped into the business, and we all picture our first day and you walk into this 26,000 square foot, facility with 100 people. And it's like in the movies, like the record stops and everyone looks at you, that kind of thing. That's what I'm picturing. Right. But then you start to step into these roles, and eventually the GM is fired and you have to fire other employees and stuff. And how did your relationship start to change in the company as you worked with the rest of the team?
The good or bad news is because my dad was a distant figure, and in the copier space, John, the sales reps turn over a lot. Technicians, not very much. Admin, there was some decent turnover. So like I didn't walk in where my father was like some golden statue. You know what I mean? Like it was just like a normal business with the GM who didn't own the company, and a lot of, just normal stuff.
Yeah.
The GM hired there was a lot more toxic people that I just didn't care for, but there was a lot of really, really, really good people. And those really, really good people saw me sell more than everybody else. And they're like, huh. And then, by the way, salespeople.
So that probably earned some respect then.
100%, man. Yeah. And like my first, I signed one of the largest clients ever, archivers, right before they went bankrupt. I sold them 50 copiers across the world, across the US, and a couple $1 million contract. I mean, I made a buttload of money in my early 20s that was earned. And so what happens with salespeople in a lot of organizations, they don't treat service people very well. So like me, I'm like, well, these are my family because it's a family business. So like as people are installing copiers, Christmas Eve or whatever, I'm buying people pizza and beer and I'm hanging out with them. I did technician rides. So like I cared about every facet of the business instead of just sales. So not only was I selling more, but I was experiencing every angle of the business through self-motivation. Like I was talking to the service manager I've known for, I'm like, I want to ride around with techs. Like, what are we doing here? So like, I think it was a lot of that then I got advocates of people that knew I was in there to make change. I was in there to break stuff, man. It was like, this isn't working. And so like, they just knew that I just was going to get stuff done. And that where I think that got me into trouble is I was too naive, where I had some really toxic people that used me. I mean, they could play me like a fiddle. Like, look at this kid all the way through. Oh, you and Corey.
How did they play you? Like looking back on it now, can you give an example of a way in which you realized after the fact that some toxic person was actually manipulating you, and you realized it later?
We had a very, very specialized, very high paid, high production print specialist, as well as a software engineer. They were not being treated fairly. I lobbied. I got them new titles. I got that one guy. He went from a $50,000 salary to I think 120 over 4 years. I paid for his master's program, and he quit 2 days after he got it.
Oh, wow.
And then they both went to the competitor. Yep. So they were like, they were there long enough to watch me change everything, get what they wanted, and then just jump without any remorse, dude. It's like.
And no contingencies that they had to repay the degree or stay for a certain period of time or anything like that. Some companies. You did.
the title, the education, and the experience I gave him was so valuable that someone was able to write a $50,000 check and pay him 100.
Wow. Wow.
And I was like, hey man, like that sucks. Really mad, but like, hey, do you think you can like stay for 2 months and help me with standard operating procedures and like pass on the baton? He's like, nope, 2 weeks.
And so in retrospect, what was it about that personality or the company that led them to leave?
They were resentful towards the GM and the culture and the tie. So I get that, man. Like it sucked. But then I thought I'm like, hey, I'm different. Like I'm here to help. Are you here to help me? And then I felt like he betrayed me, even though I was trying to help him. So I don't know, man. Like I wish I would have seen that coming. But like it's back to the owner's kid. Like, who's trying to? And I don't have generational money, but that's the same people. I think same issue those kind of people run into. Like, why do people really like you?
Yeah,
is like this it gets too convoluted.
Now, eventually, within I think about a 5-year period, you eventually sell the company. Now, did you ever have a discussion with your father about taking over equity in the company, or did you remain, a salaried employee with commissions?
So that right there, that question is the root and the origination of what I'm doing now. Because my father and I ran a lifestyle business, even though it was doing 20 million. And so there's a lot of jargon out there, a lifestyle business. What does that mean? Here's my definition of it. Because everything boils down to what is the goal of the entrepreneur? It's like when we get in our car, we put in point B. Where are we going? If we don't know where we're going, the timeline that we want to get there in, we're just making things up. So what happens is everybody that's running a business right now is guided towards some North Star, whether they have articulated it fully or not at all. They're still waking up solving towards something. Most people solve towards revenue, optimizing their gross profit dollar amounts, how much then falls into their checking account with a hope, and then how much can you pull in cash out of that entity each year. So salary, distributions, perks. So revenue, gross profit, checking account should allow me to suck a bunch of money out of this company. Well, that like never once was it, what could it be worth? So there was no like conversations about equity, because it was like, how do we get our hands on that cash flow? That's a lot, because there was a lot of cash flow in that business. Yeah. Even though there was a lot of different, we had a financial structure that was messed up, which was resulting in a lot of our problems. But so the challenges was, John, is my dad just wanted out, and it was, how are we going to slice up the annual cash flow, which was being sucked up by debt and by all this other, payables, receivables, all the inventory. So there wasn't a bunch of actual cash, but there was a lot of cash flow. Yeah. And so we didn't know how to slice that up. And therefore there was conversations for years, John. He's like, I want out. He's like, what am I going to give you more of my cash flow for? What the hell for? I did this. And versus, hey, what's this thing worth? What's the difference between reinvesting and taking the distribution? So that's why, like, one of my big components is what we have to separate leadership roles. Like, you have a normal org chart. Everybody should get a W-2 for the jobs that they do, whether they're family, friends, this or that, doesn't matter. Get an org chart, pay everybody what they should get paid, kind of like a sports team. You got all the players. Then you have the ownership group, right? You don't watch Mark Cuban go out on the basketball court, right? Yeah. And that separation, we didn't have the intellectual ability or data to even have that conversation, John. So it was back to that cash flow, trying to slice that up. And finally, we're like, there's no way. The bankers, the CPAs, we were in Vistage, dude. Like, we're 20 million. We had good advisors, supposedly, in quotes. No one was able to sit us down and have that conversation to say, hey, guys, what's this worth? What's Corey trying to solve for? What are you trying to solve for? Personally, financially, professionally. And it just, so then there's just that massive like feeling of being stuck, because you can't move forward. And it's not the EOS type stuck. It's like, it's the ownership, leadership, company, cash flow, equity, swirling soup. And then we're like, after a year and a half, he's like, Ryan, we were sitting down having beers. He's like, give me my money. I never want to talk about copiers again.
So sorry, selling Ryan, was kind of the out. Well, yep. So you have the benefit of hindsight. It's been about 10 years now since you sold. Looking back on it now, is there anything that you would have done differently, or do you think you would have still sold? I'm
going to answer it two ways. I love my life right now, John. Like, I can only imagine, man, if I was still stuck in the copier world, I would probably be making an insane amount of money. And I would be so leveraged. I'd be just like every other neighborhood that everybody's probably financing their HVAC service calls right now. Like, so I know, I can see what my fate would have been. Like, make more money, spend more money, make more money.
Yeah.
That was my upbringing. That was my dad's mantra. That was mine. And so
Yeah.
I'm really happy I'm not selling copiers and talking about copiers and trying to build out managed IT services and be stuck in that. However, and like, I really like helping people and I love what we're doing now. But if I were to mechanically, like just on like, kind of like a strategy operational side, say we had turned the business around, John, to like normalized EBITDA would have been in the seven figures. We were rocking and rolling, dude. Like I built out a managed IT offering. We won the Minnesota Wild doing data center hosting. We had a integrated IT services with our help desk. We had people on site. We like a full technology provider, the Minnesota Wild. And it took multiple meetings for the buyer to even understand how we had built that. And people are still trying to get caught up to that stuff. So like I loved it, but there was no path forward. So like but as far as like if we would have kept growing, because that industry is still doing good.
Really, even now in 2023, as we record this, with all the digitization that has happened in recent years,
it's a commodity, dude. I mean, like there's the weaker people getting weeded out, but we were already in the top side of this. So like it was enough size at that point where yes, our print volume was shrinking every year, but we built out software automation, we built out the managed IT services. The only thing we didn't
make it more
hosting, it was the profit per customer that mattered. But going back to what was my dad solving for? He wanted his annual cash flow that he expected. He wanted to get fair pay for the actual equity. He didn't need all the money up front. And that's where like, it's like, there's this cash flow versus equity. And how would someone like me buy the company from my father? Right. In that situation, you're going to do seller's financing. And he's just like, this doesn't make, we need that cash flow to rebuild and to grow. So there was it was a cash flow issue, John. So between debt, taxes, reinvestment, there was not enough cash flow to facilitate the buyout on top of the cash flow he needed for his life at the same time. But we could have grown it for another couple of years. So if I would have said, this is what we would have done, I would have said, Corey, you can now actually just be a board member. You can just be there. You can collect your salary and I can have my amount of salary. I don't need any distributions. We're going to turn it around over the next 36 months. We'll keep going because we had already done a really good job.
Yeah.
So then we could have done either a partial ESOP, partial private equity to give him a liquidity with some more skin in the game for a bigger payday. But ESOP or private equity, the partial liquidity event, while I had control, I mean, I would have been a private equity guy's or gal's dream. Young kid, turn the whole business around, just needs some capital.
Yeah. That's exactly their model. Yeah. Yeah. So all of this kind of brings us to where you are today. So you end up selling the business. Before we get to what you're doing now, how did those discussions come about? Did you end up, approaching? You sell to a local competitor. Did you end up approaching them? Did you know them through networking groups? Was it a casual conversation over a beer one night? Hey, what if we were to sell? What was that? How did that happen?
More juicy than that, John. My dad started their copier division.
Started the copier division of the competitor.
And then because he got transferred to Arizona. He came back to Minnesota. Then he started their copy division. I believe there were some conversations had, promises weren't kept. My dad quit. I'm not one to say.
Before starting his company.
Dude.
Okay.
So literally my dad quit their company, started our business.
A bigger company, and then sold
and we were saying, I mean, we have to have, both parties had to have spent $1 million over the 17 years suing each other for employees. So those people that I said quit and screwed me over.
You sold to a company you'd sued.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Wow.
Like it was like the copier industry is so ancestral. It's like, you get your best salespeople from your competitors because they got the clients, and then you hire the technicians. And so everybody's doing that all the time. So it was this mortal, and my dad started their division. So it was like this mortal hatred. And literally a bunch of our old employees worked there, and a bunch of their old employees worked at our place. And so when we got to this point where we were finally done, John, the business was healthy. I had built out what I would call the Zappos culture. I mean, dude, it was so fun. We were solving really cool problems with really good people with little egos. I mean, it was a lot of fun. We got to this point where he wanted out, but we didn't know out of what. Is it the cash flow? Is it the job? Is it the, there's no way to articulate that. And then how to clarify it and then structure the plan. Yeah. So that feeling of trap, then I didn't really understand private equity investment bankers. We met a bunch of those people. They took a bunch of money from us to do a deal pitch book, but 50 grand later, they never called us back. I mean, like, honestly, the stories. So we called up 3 local competitors. I sat down with each of them to say, hey, I mean, we told we told a fib. I would call it a fib. Corey wants out and Ryan doesn't know what he wants to do long-term. Even though I would have, if someone could have given me the path on how to buy it and grow it, I would have taken it. But we had hit our head against the wall so many times. So we found these 3 local competitors. One of them wanted to come into the cities. So they were valuing the business on the cash flow valuation, John, which was good. I mean, it wasn't losing money anymore. We were doing 7 figures at least. And so it was a cash flow valuation, which was not enough for my dad to retire and for me to be fine. The other one was just not interesting because they didn't have any IT services or any of the technology that we had built out, where it was just kind of an old copier company. And the one that we did sell to, which I just do think they're wonderful people. It was like, I really, really do enjoy them. They got to gut the company because it was 20 minutes down the road. So they only needed 33 out of my 90 employees when we sold. And they didn't need the servers, the building, the ERP subscription. So I'm getting geeky here, but the ad backs, I went line by line by line by line by line by line and just gutted the company, including myself.
And how did you feel about that? Were there good? Did you know about that going into it? Did you feel bad about any of the?
Horrible.
Yeah,
it was horrible. It was the worst experience I've ever had.
So this was something that they didn't disclose to you going into the acquisition?
It's the only way we could get out. This is one of the biggest problems with privately held businesses that are not backed by private equity or VC. They don't have that injection of, this is an asset we need a return. So like what happens is we did all that work turning the business around, but my dad still wanted out, but we didn't know out of the cash flow, out of the job. We didn't know how to deal with this. So I had spent 6 years of my life and millions of dollars turning this business around to get it to the point where it's a perfect platform to go to the future. And the only way to get out and for my dad to retire with the money that he deserved was to gut the company.
That's so hard.
It just doesn't. I know it doesn't have to be that way, but most people don't know that. So it was really, and it also
took years afterwards of the work that you do now, figuring that out in order to even understand that.
Yep.
Yeah. And so you ended up selling the company and, well, first of all, I have to ask, how are you able to, recover from the wounds from years of suing this competitor to even have healthy discussions and be transparent and and share your P&L with this company when you view them as such a cutthroat competitor?
Wonderful question, my friend. It happens every day, man. Because the moment that someone says, hey, I can eliminate my competitor, we had 3,200 clients or something like that, take their clients, it's a defeat. I mean, like if you really think about it, it's like, hey, Corey's finally out. I win. I mean, I have no idea if Jim actually thinks that. I really, really like the company that bought us.
Yeah.
But it was just like 2 sports teams. And like, it's the same thing. I don't know how like a quarterback that plays on one team and then they go to the, they do the same thing. Yeah. But what I do know is that my funny story is, John, we're sitting down at Jim's, the buyer's lake house with his CFO, Neil, who I love. I love both these guys. And my dad, me, and our controller.
This is before the transaction?
No, this is when we were actually doing those ad backs. So we had up on the screen.
Okay, so you're still negotiating it. Okay.
Yeah, and we sat down and I said, Jim and Neil, if my dad worked for you for this last 17 years, there's no way his book of business would be this big. So it's a net positive for everybody, don't you think? I just had to like break the ice. And then we got into it. I have no proof behind this, but there was probably, everybody knows that if they're selling to a competitor, the moment you get the client list, because you have to do contract audits, that is terrifying.
I would think, right? Because you're just worried that they're going to be like, okay, start dialing, guys.
And we had like big clients like Valspar and like Worldwide and all these. And like all of a sudden, our buyers are going, hey, are you guys selling? I mean, so like, I don't know if it was the closed doors at our office or if they, you never know where the culprit is, but time, and especially if you're doing a strategic sale to a third party that competes with you, time is your worst enemy. So like the goal is to get that done as fast as possible versus like some private equity firm is probably not going to go steal your clients unless
right. So if you're selling to a strategic buyer, it sounds like your advice is hold on to that customer list as long as you can and reveal it as late as you can.
Like the minute before the purchase agreement is signed and the bank wire happens.
Really?
Well, I mean, maybe not that extent, but like
as much as you
customer
can,
A, customer B, customer C, you can have a lot of the data without the names. So you can do a lot of that work without it.
So let's get to the work that you do now, because it's funny. I think back and when I started my entrepreneurial journey, which is 2011, and I would practice law for a bunch of years, and I had a bookkeeper who was using QuickBooks desktop version on his computer, and he would send me the books once a year. And he really resisted switching over to QuickBooks Online. When I got to QuickBooks Online, I couldn't believe what a revelation it was. I could see my numbers a lot more precisely. And part of what you do is you built dashboards now to help people have literally like the dashboard in front of them, the stuff that you didn't have, that I didn't have when I was starting out. So talk about now how you ended up building what you didn't have.
Yeah. So it starts with, so we've got three lines of business, really two, but we have an education business, which is how Arkona started. So I realized, John, because I was in Vistage and I was talking to my buddies, they wanted to, I consulted and did a bunch of random stuff for 5-6 years and got a bunch of certifications. I over academic myself, if that's even a word, but like went and got a bunch of certifications. Then I went back and just realized that everything that I went through was way more valuable than any of those certifications. But I'd have to constantly sit down with other entrepreneurs. And again, these are not private equity folks. They're not Silicon Valley folks. They're like, what's this worth and what's the return? It's all of the story I just said, that most of these people, it's their psychographic. That's the ideal person. And I'd have to have constant conversations about like, what the hell are you actually solving for? Is it more revenue? Is it more cash flow? Is it less of a job? No one knew. And then they actually, so the goal was anything but clear. If it was clear, EOS, scaling up, OKRs, you name whatever system it is, it's revenue. Well, I owned a $21 million revenue business that lost $940,000. If we would have sold the business, John, in 2009, we would have owed the bank $2.5 million. Who cares? Who cares about revenue? Yeah. And so like, I'm sitting there going like, okay, so all of my friends and all of my contacts, they're solving for revenue. It's on their BHAG. It's on their like, and I'm like, do you have any idea what your company's worth? I go, so I was like, and it was insane, John. I kept finding this over and over again because I thought I had so much shame and guilt. I thought we had all of that and it was our fault because we didn't have schooling. We didn't go, all the reasons that we thought we shouldn't have been able to accomplish that. I'm like, oh my God, we're actually kind of normal. And then I'm like, revenue is your goal? I go, what if you have crappy revenue? Your company's not worth anything. I'm like, so you're just waking up every day and just making insane decisions to deploy capital, people, resources, and energy into things that you have no idea whether it's growing value or not. And people just kind of look at me like, I guess if you say it like that. And I'm like, well, is it true that you want a valuable company? Yes. Do you know what it's worth? No. Do you have a valuation target? No. And here's now what that means. So that's why we started the education business about valuations, value growth, finance, all the exits, how to think and view it like an asset. How do you like all of that? There's 5 principles and there's a bunch of stuff in that. But then what happened, John, is like mechanically, if you said, okay, like, and this is where I'm a huge junkie for incentives, which is why I like macroeconomics, monetary policy, any of this stuff, because why are people doing what they're doing? Well, it has to be the goal. The goal is what synthesizes all of the behavior to go get it. It's what makes all of the behavior and decisions make sense. It gives it context, right? So as I was looking, like, well, if the goal's wrong or like way half-assed, all of these problems are because the goal's wrong. Like if you wanted to go to Florida and you put your Google Maps into California, you're going to be pissed the whole way. Because you're going around.
Yeah.
You go to the wrong gas station. You go to the wrong. Your
Right.
timing's off. Your gas station stops. Your rest. Like it's just insane. Like so, the target equity valuation. So I'll kind of mechanically explain this and then explain what this means to the owner is like, well, actually, let me inverse that. I don't know about the listeners or you, John, but I can speak on my behalf. The reason that I'm owning my business, I want to have I want equity to grow. I want my company to grow in equity so I have more wealth. I want clear visibility into the cash flow personally that I have between now and when that target valuation happens. I also want to know what are my taxes going to be every single year and how does that impact my cash flow? And then how much is left every single year? So like hypothetically, let's say we have $1 million in cash flow. We got to pay 300 grand in taxes. You take 200 grand out. We got $500,000 left over to reinvest. Where are you going to put it? What return are you going to get? Do you have any idea? Hypothetically, and people are just guessing. Like your rocks in EOS, how much do they cost? Do you have enough? How does that impact your distributions, your taxes, and your target timeline for your target valuation? There's no framework for these decisions. So at the end of the day, owning a company, ownership, you care about equity growth and the trade-offs between reinvestment and distributions. That's it, man.
Yeah.
That's when you look in your stock portfolio, that's what private equity cares about. Then there's this job. So what we want is that, like, that's what people know that, but they don't know if like, hey, if I buy this building or I hire that CEO for 250 grand while launching that product and doing that comp plan, will I run out of cash next May? I don't know.
Yeah.
The only way you can know is if you take that target normalized EBITDA. So let's say I want a $2 million normalized EBITDA, aka cash flow in 2030. You reverse engineer the income statement, the balance sheet, and the cash flow statement. It has to be all three. Otherwise, you can't get visibility into that cash flow. And 95% of the people I talk to only forecast out the income statement. And it won't show you your distributions, your cash flow, or the reinvestment or working capital. So like people are flying blind to a goal that they don't have. That's correct. And so like, I don't know, it's just this fascinating conundrum I've seen.
This also sounds like a big software challenge. So did you have to pour millions of dollars into creating something that solved for this challenge?
No, we did go through that. So what happened was we had the training program. We've had like 550 some entrepreneurs go through it where they're like, oh my God, I get it. I get normalized EBITDA. I get multiples. I get how to de-risk my cash flow. And essentially our philosophy, John, is that the goal is to build the value of the business based on sustainable, predictable, transferable cash flow. And the cash flow valuation hits your goals. If you want to strategically sell to someone, gut the company like I did and get a premium, that's your call. But in that situation, if the cash flow valuation for my father and I would have been fine for him, we could have facilitated 1,000 different buyouts, essentially like 360 degrees of options. But what I say is, we built that, we were showing that to people and people were like, oh, I want that. That led us to building out our fractional CFO services. So we have a CFO offering. Each of our CFOs gets 5 clients. They sit on the L10s if they're running EOS or whatever operating system they are. But then people were not needing them. They can't afford the CFO plus the reinvestment, or their business is simple. And they kept going, but I want the visibility of that dashboard. So we looked at buy, build, or partner. And like, dude, we're not a software company. And I was a software reseller and implementer back, and that's still complicated. Mm-hmm. We didn't want to partner. I've gone through partnerships. That's a struggle. I did that in my last company, like partner with telecom, because we didn't do that, or data centers. And we said, you know what? There's a category over the last probably 3 to 5 years, John, kind of like, you know, when CRMs came out and then email marketing came out, and the new category created. The new category that has been built over the last 5 years is the FP&A. A lot of middle market companies don't know that it's financial planning and analytics. Big companies have the FP&A division that reports to the CFO. It's all scenario planning, modeling. Yeah. So they have these FP&A softwares that connect to your QuickBooks, connect to your payroll system, and connect to custom data. So you can do that 3-statement forecast tied to your valuation target. Well, it's the end. So kind of like if you think about like HubSpot or Salesforce, John, you get it. It's a ball of clay, right? Like it's got the engine, but you have to apply your logic to it. So that's what we did, is take me and my partners. None of us are CFOs or CPAs, but We've been through dozens of transactions combined together. So we know what good looks like. And so our goal is with that software, we applied our logic to it, essentially private equity logic, John. Like it's that visibility that you're talking about. So now these entrepreneurs who like, dude, I know everybody that I work with, they know how to explain where they've been, where they are, and where they want to go very clearly. They're really good storytellers generally. And then you go, hey, prove it. And they're like, whiteboards, PowerPoints. And the reality is, if they go to Southern Business, they have to tell that story using the numbers.
Yeah.
So we're helping them connect that story to the numbers. And when you eliminate the math, the pivot tables and broken spreadsheets, and the inability for a lot of finance folks to communicate with visionary entrepreneurs, you eliminate that noise and allow the owner to see into the future the way that they think, they can make a lot of these decisions themselves, man. So like, that's what we're doing, is building that out. So it's really just building out that dashboard with the logic and then helping them think through their trade-offs.
That is a really cool solution. And I want to point everyone to where they can check it out. But first, before they do, I have a final question that I always ask. Now, usually I have to warn the audience. I usually warn my guests beforehand, but I actually forgot to tell Ryan about it, but I'm going to ask him it anyways. And we'll see if he can work on his feet. He's a sales guy at heart, so I think he'll probably be fine. But so I call this my gratitude question. I love asking people about especially peers and contemporaries and mentors who help them along the way. Now, I will warn that a lot of times people default to mentioning family members or team members or something like that. You've already mentioned your dad before, had a big impact on you. But are there any others that maybe didn't even come up in this journey, especially peers or contemporaries or mentors who you would just want to shout out publicly and thank them for helping you in your journey?
I have to default to family, man. It's my wife, dude. I've been with her since I was 19 and I had long hair and a bunch of earrings and didn't go to school. And like, there's a special spot, regardless of who's the main entrepreneur, the spouse of an entrepreneur is a unique person because, hey, believe me, trust me, this is going to work. And like, that is no leap of faith that it should be like poo-pooed, because like when you're risking the future of your economics for your family, and I've got daughters and kids, and like, so I don't know, man, like I've had a lot of mentors and entrepreneurs, a lot more of mine. I would take like more like Andrew Carnegie and his, Napoleon Hill book, where it's people that don't know who I am or they're dead. So like, I'm a big reader, but like, I'd say my wife, dude, man, like the stuff, the risks that I've taken wouldn't be possible without her having my support.
Yeah. Okay, great. Ryan, where can people go to learn more about you and Arkona and the dashboards that you talked about before and the fractional CFO services and all that kind of stuff?
Website's the best, Arkona. It's ARKONA.io. Podcast is there. There's a starter kit with it's a bunch of samples of our online training, and then there's a bunch of stuff out there.
Awesome, Ryan. Thanks so much.
Thanks, John.
Thanks for listening to the Smart Business Revolution podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.